Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. I have a brilliant guest today. Crispin Thompson is the founder of the Leadership Studio. He spent more than 25 years shaping how people lead, communicate, and grow. Senior roles at Hewlett-Packard, Task Us, and QSC, and managed large international teams, drove transformational programs, which, and this is the part I really want to get into, helps leaders bridge the gap between how they see themselves and how others experience them. Ooh, the water cooler talk stuff. Crispin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So there's so much here, as I was saying to you before we hit the old record button here, that I want to get into. But I want to start off making the point that many of the things that you talk about not only address leadership in professional roles, but kind of the way we present ourselves to the world as well. Is that something that you find that there's like a real carryover for a lot of the things that you talk about?
Oh, absolutely. While we put a focus on leaders, and obviously there's a corporate aspect of that, the reality is leaders come in all shapes and sizes. It doesn't mean that you have to be a manager. Maybe it's just that it's a church thing, you're a leader in your church, or maybe you just want to be a better communicator to your family. I think
Yeah.
there's leadership comes in all phases, and how we reflect outwards, how we are seen and perceived, I think absolutely carries over from one to the other.
Yeah, I look at this and I think everybody has some capacity in their life where they could do better in terms of communicating. And the thing that you talk about a lot is confidence. And oh my
Mhm.
gosh, don't we all need to know how to navigate that? But I think more feel it internally and project it, because both of those things, I don't know, can you project confidence when you don't really have it internally?
You can for a time. I do believe that. I think for sure that I'm a believer in fake it till you make it. But I think the challenge of that particular sentence though is that there are those that believe the fake it can last in perpetuity, and it
Yeah,
cannot. You will be found out. It will eventually. So long as you're committed to the make it side of that expression, then
I like
I think you
that.
can be. But it's temporary, and I think it won't feel genuine to you as well, right? So you can for true, I believe confidence breeds confidence. Absolutely. So if you appear confident, if you are confident, if you are exuding confidence, then that will be reflected out to the audience. They will be more confident in you, your message, your leadership. But if it's fake, if it's false, if it's bravado, it
Hmm.
doesn't last forever, and it won't feel genuine to you as the leader, as the speaker, as yourself.
And to your point about how others perceive you, people can see through that. Like
They they
people
they
know,
absolutely can,
like
yeah.
you can, if you start off and you can deliver some results, that's great. But that again, that can be just dumb luck. And you really need to be able to, if you're going to offer confidence to your team and to your, even to your family, to whomever, you have to ground that in something. So where do we start to ground that, particularly when we are living in a world where everything changes exponentially? And this morning you may be confident about something, but by lunchtime, the whole scene may have changed. So, how do we build confidence in a world where, and you make this point, decisions are not always easy to make? How do we do that?
You know, so it's funny because I 100, 1,000, a million times in my career, I've been asked the question, what's one skill that leaders need to develop? And of course, there's not one, but one thing I fall back to as a response to that question is I believe very strongly in introspection. Like we should know ourselves. We should be willing to look inside ourselves, and and that's super important to your question here, because if we're feeling confident in the morning and we aren't by, or it's starting to wane by lunchtime, then we need to look inwards. We need to look at what's caused that. We need to know ourselves well enough to know what has chipped away, or little bit, the kind of create the little fissures in our confidence. What's breaking that, so that we can either repair it, we can avoid it, or we can fake it, maybe in a short-term period. But if we take the time to know ourselves, to build up on the things, like know where we're strong, know where we're weak, that also helps you kind of avoid that kind of sine wave, the peaks and troughs of confidence and lacking confidence in various scenarios. And I think that the other reason about we should know ourselves and look inside is it also is a good way to remind ourselves that we have had breaks in our confidence. We have had missteps, or maybe even indeed failures in our past, and we've gotten through them. We've moved past it. We can. So if something has really shaken you, you can look at how do we get past something like that in the past. And the thing that I always fall back to, especially if there's something deep, if I'm starting to feel like I don't belong, imposter syndrome, right? That thing. Then the thing that's always helped me is thinking back to when have I felt that before, and why. Usually it's when you're in some new or stressful position, something has pushed you significantly outside of your comfort zone, and I think about, why was I there? Someone had given me an opportunity, someone had selected me, I'd gotten some promotion. So, said differently, other people had had confidence in me. And shame on me. Shame on me for not being willing to have the same amount of confidence in myself that others had, right? So just step up and be willing to, if not meet, at least aim toward the expectations of others. And it's a good journey. And the other side of that is I'm a big opponent to the term perfection. I think, especially as leaders and communicators, perfection is unachievable. So we should strive for continuous improvement, be better tomorrow than we were today. And that alone is a great way to help just remind ourselves, how do we maintain and project confidence outwards.
So there are a couple of things that you just touched on and I'm going to actually write the words down because I know that our conversation is interesting. I'll take it right out of my head. So the first thing, when you talk about introspection, and you mentioned this in some of your website and your materials, is it about your core values? Is it about going back to, at the end of the day, when information is incomplete, what's really important here?
Mhm.
What's our goal, and what aligns with who we are and what we want to achieve at the same time? Because sometimes in an imperfect world, and this is the other piece that I want to talk about, I talk a lot with Brilliantly Resilient about taking imperfect action, because nothing is going to be
Mhm.
perfect. There's always going to be some side of it. So, does that introspection involve recognizing your core values in any way, or your company's core values, or the mission statement? Like when everything's going crazy, do you go back that far? And then this is another thing you talk about, when information is not necessarily perfect or available or whatever, can you take that imperfect action?
Yeah, and I think it's important that we do. Inaction is so much worse than maybe taking a step forward that at some point in the future we might realize was maybe not the step that we should have taken in that moment. And for sure, as we have struggles, as we have missteps, the other side of all this is trying to think about, if we did something that we now realize was wrong, what drove us to that? So we focus on how did we make that decision? Was it back to, as you talk about, core values? Was it back to imperfect data, imperfect information? And how do we learn from that? Because as you say, the world is changing at a pace that's really unseen, and perhaps even unsustainable, and we have to make decisions. It's funny you bring this up, because I actually have a whole like keynote that I give on the importance of being decisive as leaders, just making decisions. And because especially if you're in a bigger company, and just speaking to anyone in the audience that's in, like, Fortune 1000, this to be true. It's very easy for certain leaders to kind of make half decisions or half
Mm.
answers, and it becomes like the collective responsibility of four layers, which is another way of saying you didn't really take accountability. And I think so you talk about core values. And if we go back to who we are, knowing who we are and what we care about, then we kind of, bounce that against maybe what are the values of our company, or the mission statement, or any of those other things. It keeps us honest, but we should be willing as leaders to make decisions, to own our decisions, to be accountable for our decisions, whether they are amazing or whether they are slightly less amazing than we would like them to be in hindsight, and then continue on this focus of just be better tomorrow than we were today. Like all these things together, it's no one thing in the vacuum, right? All these things together, help shape us to how do we really show up and be the version of ourselves, how we reach our potential and be as good as we can be in every situation, big, small, whatever, life, corporate, all these things.
So I think one of the things that I'm hearing from you is that as leaders, it's okay to recognize that some of our decisions, they're just not going to be perfect. And it sounds like you're saying it's also okay to, if not convey that to the team in so many words, like, hey, this could be a real screw up. You don't want to necessarily say that, but acknowledging and being aware that situations evolve, things are not always going to be perfect. Let's do this. This fits the best. This decision fits the best with where we are right now. This is what we're going to do, and then we're going to see what happens next, and we'll go from there. Is that kind of because to me, in some ways, it might sound a little wishy-washy, but at the same time, again, with the point of how the world's changing, I don't know that leaders can always make solid decisions without saying, this is where we are now, this is the best place to be, and we're going to do this. And then you
Yeah, if
wait
our
till it evolves.
so evolution, that's the word, right? If we cannot evolve in our thinking and our actions, then what are we doing, right? Like we cannot be static in a world that is dynamic, and if we need to be dynamic, then we have to accept that that means that we may make choices, we may make decisions, we may take actions that later prove to be changed, even if it's not wrong. We just do it differently. The lesson in my own life along some of these journeys has been about a third of my career was in sort of strategy roles, and in a strategy role you don't make anything, you don't sell anything, you don't fix anything. It's a very kind of nebulous set of activities, but you see a lot of ideas, and you hopefully are creating a lot of ideas, and hopefully a lot of them are great, but not everything works. But one thing that I found super valuable was you never throw anything away. You become kind of like a knowledge pack rat,
Like a
because
library, yeah, a library of
absolutely
stuff. Yeah.
a library of stuff, because what's absolutely true is that something you try today may fail, but it may not fail because it was a bad idea. Maybe the conditions were wrong. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe everything was right, but there wasn't the right kind of funding, or even just technology wasn't available to us just yet, and we didn't realize it. So you never throw anything away. You put it back on the shelf. You know where it is. You have your index. I like your library analogy, so that you can pull it back out, dust it off, and think about maybe now is the time. And of course, the other thing is ideas cycle. Sometimes something
Yeah.
works, and then things change and no longer works, and then the conditions sort of reset themselves, so that now is the time that we can try that again. So and I think as leaders, we have to accept that not everything we say or do will be 100% perfect every single time, right? That's not We're not machines, and we should also acknowledge that the machines aren't perfect, right? How many articles a day can we find where AI
They
has
hallucinate. I
has
love
a
that term.
yeah,
They
yeah,
hallucinate. Okay, so
yeah.
it's not just me hallucinating.
Yeah,
It's
it's a nice catchy term for they made
right.
stuff up. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
But we have to be willing to evolve. And the other thing is we have to create an environment where as leaders within our teams, within our organizations, that it's understood that obviously we want every decision to be right. But when they aren't, or when things go wrong, or when there's just a mistake, when there's just something someone screwed up, that there's an environment that enables us to kind of learn from that, and all those things. And you talk about core values, and I'll just talk about one of my own as a leader. One of my core principles as a leader was always that praise goes downward and blame goes upward.
Huh.
So because especially when you have a big organization, if someone makes a mistake and it turns out to have, financial or maybe customer experience kind of implications, things that could be felt, the the person who made the mistake, there's a lot, maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe the machine did something wrong. Who knows? But coming down on this one person in some office on the other side of the world and saying, what the hell did you do, is not going to help the situation. Saying, I own it, we'll fix it, we'll figure out how we put controls in place to keep from having tomorrow. Again, the focus on continuous improvement. That's the, and again, if there's a performance issue, you manage that, right? You work through those things. But the environment where we understand that things occasionally happen, which is life, is how we should set everything up as, I think, as successful leaders.
And I think without having that as a basic foundational principle as a leader, you really can stifle innovation
Absolutely.
in terms of your team. I mean, if people are afraid to make a mistake, and I see this even I'm looking again at personal applications for all of this. You have to be willing to recognize that mistakes are they're just going to happen. Again, if for no reason other than what you did right in the morning might be changed by the afternoon because of the way things are moving. But to your point, you need to allow the people that you are leading the freedom to make mistakes, the freedom to try and to come and to bring the best that they have in any moment in the situation without second guessing themselves into inertia.
Absolutely. I think there's a difference between saying quality doesn't matter, because that's not what we're saying,
Right.
than saying, so, do your best, bring your best, and show me what that is. But then when something goes wrong, we're going to look at how do we make it better. I think that's the difference there, because you also can't be the person that says, mistakes don't matter. They do, but we need to understand, like, how it happened, why it happened. Is it training? Is it the system? Is the process? Did something happen that didn't get updated? There's a million myriad reasons, right, that could be there to have enabled something to have gone wrong, that have nothing to do with, hey, Chris, you screwed up. And so we should focus on those things. And then, of course, if there's, like I said, if it's a performance issue, you just treat it as such.
Exactly. So this our conversation, it sounds like, has dovetailed very well into your idea of perfectionism undermining confidence.
Hmm.
So so let's expand on that a little bit. The idea of being perfect, first of all, is unsustainable and it's unachievable. You can't
It's
you
unachievable.
just can't do it. Second of all, I guess it inhibits learning. It inhibits again, as we said, innovation. How does that perfectionism idea inhibit confidence?
Well, I'll just take it back and just talk about my own life and experience and things. And today I feel reasonably confident in myself as a speaker, as a communicator, as a leader, but that wasn't always true. In fact, there was definitely a phase in my career, a point in my career, where if there was a presentation to be given, it would go to anyone else, because that was
Not your
whatever
thing.
strengths I had, that was not on my list.
It's not your
And
thing.
and in, like, a lot of people, in fact, maybe no one is born saying, "Oh my gosh, I want to be a public speaker. I want to stand up in front of the group and have everyone watch me." But that wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy that, and I wasn't a great speaker. I was very fast. I could record time sprint through any
I used
presentation,
to
and that
do
was
that too. Just get it
and it
out, get it
was and it was just nerves. And what I realized was that was, it was an inhibitor for my career. People who were better at that, but maybe not as good as other things, were being noticed and accelerating. And so it was something that I needed to work on. But part of my problem was that I was so focused on get it right, get it right, get it right,
out.
that when the inevitable thing, something came out of my mouth not the way I wanted it to, or I said something that was meant for slide 4 and I'm on slide 3, that that thing, that break then gets in my head, and
Mm-hmm.
then it just snowballs, right? So the instant when everything had to be perfect, the instant that something's not, I'm now thinking about the more about the fact of, what did I do? Why did I do it? Oh, it wasn't perfect. And I'm not thinking about, just move on, get to the next thing, finish strong, keep making it better. And so when we're overly focused on perfect, then those things happen. Life happens, distractions happen. We had to cough, or whatever, some word, or maybe you just weren't having a great morning, and then it just snowballs, and it just, whatever confidence you came in the room with starts to deflate internally, And when it deflates internally, it's absolutely visible externally. And then you start to lose the audience. If you went from seeming confident to now seeming nervous, then the audience is looking at you. They're seeing something has changed, and then they're looking at, oh, your hands are moving. I'm a handsy talker anyway, so that's not a great example for me. But you're twitchy, or you sounded very clear and articulate, and now you have lots of pauses and ums, and body language is off, and suddenly they've realized they've been watching these things. They missed the last 2, 3 minutes of what you were saying. And what if that was the point of the whole presentation? Now you've lost them. So rather than focus on perfection, again, just focus on be better tomorrow than today. In fact, when I'm coaching individuals, especially when they tell me that this is a weakness of theirs, I say you start with just don't be terrible. That's your baseline. Just don't be terrible. And it's a great reminder that when you're the one speaking, whether it's like this virtual, whether it's in a small room, whether it's in front of the big room of hundreds of people, there's a very high percentage of people on the other side of the camera, or the other end of the room, that just don't want to be you. They don't want, and so you have a natural empathetic link with the audience
Mhm.
because they're happy that they're not the one speaking. They don't want to be in that position, and if something doesn't go exactly perfect, there's almost kind of an empathetic aw moment, right? Like he's human too, she's human too, nerves get to them as well. And we should remember that. Like we're, at least for now, we're all people in the room. There's no robots doing the other side of it. And we have that ability to create the empathetic connection with one another.
It's interesting that you said that in exactly the way you said it, because one of my notes here is that these kinds of mistakes, these kind of little flub ups, these kind of, oh, the technology's not working now, what am I going to do? They are connectors. They are connectors, or they can be connectors with the audience if you recognize it as such. And again, don't get lost in the, oh my God, I made a mistake, I made a mistake. Very often, I mean, I feel like it's almost better to acknowledge it in some small way, like, oh, here we go again with the computer or whatever. And you make a connection, which is helpful in the long run. It's not one straight path.
Yeah, the other way to think about this, because we're talking so much about perfection or the unattainable nature of it, is to remind ourselves that, let's say that we go and we have a big presentation, we're in front of 150 people, 300 people, whatever, and it's recorded. I assure you that if I came away thinking this was amazing and perfect, that if I watch it a year later, if I watch it 2 years later, 5 years later, I will see three, four, five things that I think could, would, or should be improved upon. Doesn't mean that the event was bad. Doesn't mean that my points didn't land. It means that styles change, our own confidence changes. We could say things differently now than we did, or we just realize this point landed in the room in a way I didn't anticipate. And if I were to do it again, I would hit it harder or hit it softer.
Hmm.
And so it's not about how amazing is it in the moment. It's that we will evolve, we will improve, and for sure, I have gone back and watched things from 2015, 2019, whatever, and not that they were bad per se, but it's hard to watch myself on video anyway. But you go back and you're like, oof, why did I say it like that? Why those words? Or why, I now see this is something I've stopped doing, like other like mannerisms or affectation, speech patterns, that sort of thing. And so it's interesting just to, even when every bit of feedback was positive, you can go back and watch it and find a thing to improve. And that's the best part, because you're be better tomorrow than we were today.
And maybe with the complete awareness of all the things that you just said, that you did it in that moment because in that moment that was what was appropriate for whatever reason, for whatever the circumstances were, whatever. We don't always have control over any of that,
Mhm.
or all of that, or any of that. So I think you have to give yourself a little bit of grace in there. And that's I kind of want to move on to another part of what you talk about making, I think, is it half decisions, or how to make quick decisions when the information is not completely accessible. And I think a lot of times when you are standing up, presenting things or whatever, and something like goes awry, you're kind of stuck in that moment, like, oh my God, what do I do now? that can happen in any given situation where something comes into a situation and you have to make a decision, but you don't
Mhm.
have all of the information. You don't have enough information to completely feel confident in any course of action. So, how do you, as an individual, develop that confidence, number one, to say, look, here's where we're at? And then how do you pass that on to a team who's looking to you for confidence and advice and a foundation when things are very fluid and you don't have all the information?
A lot of it just has to start with you have to trust yourself that you back to this is where I would invert what we said. So before we said kind of core values and then sort of company values, this is where we invert it, right? Because you want to look at company first
Right.
and think about what's the within the environment, what's my own empowerment, how how trusted am I, what am I able to say yes, no, or something else to, and then own it. I think that's really really important, is kind of own the decision. The other side of that, of course, is that if you're being asked to make a decision, and it doesn't matter how important it is, if it is beyond your ability to successfully say yes or no to, it's okay to own that as well. I will take this up. I will, I agree with you. This is something that we need to do or not, whatever it is, but be okay. It's like, I think if you said in the room, "Oh yeah, absolutely, we're going to do it," knowing full well that you lack the authority to make that happen, that's worse,
Yeah.
because then the audience will see that you'll just say whatever it is in the room to get out, and then it will make them question every other response you give to every other question,
Right.
because
Right.
which was the bravado and which was the truth.
So that brings up an interesting point. Is there any place for bravado? I mean, sometimes do you just have to go, okay, guys, we're gonna do this, whether it's in business or in life or in general, because sometimes there's no good decision and you just have to step your foot into something that you know is going to be messy. How
If
do you handle that and inspire people to follow you when they're like, I'm gonna do that? No.
if you are lost in the woods, you have no idea where you are, the best thing you can do is head in some direction, right? If you just stand where
Mm,
you are, you're never going to get out. You don't know, you will continue to not know where you are. Head in one direction, see what you can learn from that, make a decision whether it's the right one. Maybe we can now see the sun, we can hear water, whatever those things are. But heading in any direction is better than heading in no direction. So
no
that
direction.
right there is a great start point. But we also want to, I think the in any of these situations, it's important to take a step and then kind of look at what did that step result us, and how do we go to the next piece, to the next piece, to the next piece. And then you want to show others, because you were talking about how do we inspire these things, and said differently, there's been many situations in my career when the my confidence in something that we had to do did not equal the words from my mouth. Like, either sometimes the decisions that we have to make, especially coming up through tech in the 90s and 2000s, especially on the operations side of the world, the name of the game was always reduce heads, reduce cost, reduce heads, reduce cost, right? And if the workloads were not decreasing, and they weren't, and then we know that there should be a logical point where this cannot continue to be achieved, but the asks would continue to come. And so, needing to understand the reason why this was done and then execute against it was my role. Helping make more people feel confident in what we're doing was also my role, whether or not I agreed every time with that. Why does my organization have to take this much pain, or how are we going to get through it? You do have to show that this is what we're going to do. And it's not about whether I agree or disagree. And sometimes you even say that if someone pushes back, well, we shouldn't. It's not about whether we want or not. Like, we sometimes there are things that we have to do. And when there's the fire behind you and the river in front of you, running into the river may be dangerous, but it is still better than standing and waiting for the fire. And so we've got to commit and move forward. And then what I always want to do is, to the extent that I can, especially with my direct staff and maybe the next layer below that, is help people understand, how did I make a decision? Why, what was my thinking? And if I'm if I'm committed to an answer, like I see this is the only one answer, but I know it's going to be wildly unpopular, and unpopularity means it will be hard to execute. The other thing I can do sometimes, and I'm both proud and not proud that I've done this in my career, is sometimes create an alternative really bad idea, something that's more painful, something that we know is worse, and put that out there as this is the clear path, and then let my staff challenge me back because they know that's the wrong idea. I'm okay for them to think that I had a bad idea if the net result is them rallying around the next best idea that may still not be the one that we all want to do, but now we're committed to it collectively. You know, we have
I
aligned
like
now,
that.
and I think you've as great leaders, we have to disconnect ego from
Hmm.
from our own actions. It is much more important for us collectively to achieve our results than for me to be the smart one or be perceived as the smart one who has all the answers. Because if I have all the answers too, then my people don't need to think. And
Mm.
if they don't need to think, then like why
What are
do I
we
have them
doing?
here? And
What are we
also
doing?
when I can never take vacation, right? If because then that's the other side of this. Like if you don't create empowerment, then you can never fully disconnect. If you can never fully disconnect, they will see the boss never disconnects. That's what's expected. They will never disconnect. And pretty soon, work-life balance is out of whack. Everyone's unhappy. Everyone feels overworked. No, and even though they might be working more hours, productivity will drop too. And so there's a lot of ramifications for these really small decisions that become very, very big over time.
Because again, everything evolves, and that often means that it grows tendrils. It
Yeah.
reaches out into different places that you might not initially anticipate. But if you start from a really solid foundation and
Hmm.
you make the best decision at the time and are transparent about that, and I think to say to people, look, we're not going to be making a perfect decision here because there is none. So let's figure out what the next, as you said, best thing, the river instead of the fire.
Hmm.
It's easier to make people see, first of all, okay, this is not gonna, there's gonna be issues and all that. But also, again, back to the earlier point that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to come at a situation with ideas that are gonna have holes in them, because what doesn't?
Yeah, and I want to put a comment on top of my own comment too because I used very very high stress imagery. There's a fire behind you and a river in front of you, but one thing that I wouldn't have said this in the beginning of my career because I was so in, everything was about the job and the company. But of course, the reality is not that we shouldn't take the decisions of our company or organization very, very seriously. We should execute against them to the best of our ability and all those things. But we also should remember that delaying a decision for the right reasons probably doesn't result in nothing tragic will happen. And I think, being willing to stand your ground and say, this is the time when I can make a decision on imperfect data, or this is the time when we should wait for a decision because the data is too imperfect. I think that only comes with time, that ability to kind of understand the the judgment calls to make and when to make them. But as really effective leaders, we need to understand, there will be times that we do that, and then be willing to stand up and say, listen, no one's going to die, right? If we do this, and let's, one day, 1 hour, 1 week might make all the difference towards success versus an emergency yes or no that could actually cripple us, down from a yeah, execution perspective down the road.
I really like that perspective, because again, no decision is made in a vacuum. There are other variables almost always along the road. And sometimes it's the wisest thing to sit and watch something unknot itself,
Mhm.
because it can unknot itself depending on what other variables are coming in. So sometimes hurry up and wait is not necessarily a bad thing when you could potentially be making a decision that's ultimately wrong.
So you use this kind of expression of unknot itself, and I think about that a lot sometimes because the where this comes up in my personal life is like when I'm using the vacuum, right? And the cord is long, and it's not going around the corner, and I see this knot, and I know that there cannot be a knot because I know how I wound it, but it looks and behaves like a knot. But if I shake it 3 times, somehow it's
It
undone, and now
unknots.
I can now get around the corner. And the reason we say this is that sometimes the way things appear on first glance, even the way they maybe even act on first and second glance, is not how they really are. And we should let our own experience decide whether we need patience or urgency. So is it immediately go and pull it out or even cut it, right? Cut it and retie it,
Hmm.
maybe, which is never the right answer with a vacuum, by the way, guys. But understanding what is the right pace there is how we leverage our own experiences to make us better every day.
I like that idea of understanding the right pace because there is a pace with these things. Okay, so now, so right there, let's pivot to how do you make a fast decision when you need to, and all of the information isn't available? Because I know this is another thing that you talk about. How can you, in confidence, make a quick decision when you don't have all the information?
It's it will sound silly, but the answer is you just have to do it and just trust. Like it's trust yourself. And as a leader, you again, that notion of kind of blame goes up and praise goes down, right? You have to understand that if you're making a decision in an imperfect information environment, that it could backfire and you're setting yourself up to potentially be the person who has to kind of accept the accountability for something that didn't go as well as we had hoped, or maybe just falls flat on its face, right? It's spectacularly wrong. But we have to think about what have we seen before, what have we seen
Hmm.
work before, what have we seen fail before, and then based on our own experiences, based on what we know to be true, based on again what we're allowed to do or not do, and how much risk it feels like the right amount in those moments, commit. Because back to leaders should be decisive. And again, we should make the information on how we've been trained, what our experiences are, what we're allowed to do, and what we see in front of us. And then at the end, it's just commit. And if you can't get to that, I mean, really, maybe it's just flip a coin. I mean, it's
Maybe,
it's
yeah.
better. A decision so often is better than no decision.
No
And
decision.
and
Because no
and
decision is a decision.
has no decision is a decision. And the just to speak slightly out of both sides of my mouth on this one, every once in a while, having the courage and conviction to be the person that stands up and says, no decision is the right decision right now, and own that is a very, very powerful move. And if it works, people will remember it for a very, very long time. And hopefully they remember it for you had the conviction and not thinking that the right answer is no decision, right? Because that's
And
not the
but I
lesson you want to be
think
taught.
to a very valid, you're making a very valid point. While you can say that some movement is better than no movement, some movement can also be no movement. The
Mhm,
movement is the decision.
mhm.
The movement is the decision. What comes after that could maybe be a step forward, or maybe it could be just okay, we're holding. You know how you hold until the price hits a low or whatever you're holding for. The decision can be the action. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do something. And I think
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
important to note.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I think too many people feel like because the world is so fast paced that they have to do something right away, right away, right away. And sometimes the best thing to do is just take a breath. Let's see
You
how
know,
this
one
resolves.
thing one thing that I would just add to that is this phrase, this turn of phrase, sense of urgency became so popular over the
Mm.
last, let's say, 12, 15 years. And I agree. Like we want to have a strong sense of urgency, but I think people misunderstand that phrase. They focus on the urgency and not on the sense.
I
Because
love
we
that.
we need to know when is urgent. Because if every the I used to say this all the time at an HP before it split, was that if everything is priority one, then you never get to anything priority two, right?
Mm.
Ever, right? And
Yeah.
and we've got to understand when is it important for us to act in this second, this moment, versus when do we do the next thing? And that's trade-offs, decision prioritizations, all those things are the things that experience will help us make the right decisions against. But yeah, the sense of urgency is the critical piece, and it has been lost in translation.
Yeah, it's the one we don't consider. I had just had a vision when you were talking about sense of urgency because you and I were talking about little kiddos before we got on the air, and I had this vision of little kids running around a playground at recess and just all of them running around it because everything in that moment is urgent and you can't live your life or make intelligent decisions that are going to move you forward. If you're running to the slide and then you're running to the swings and then you're, it's just not going to work.
Yeah,
So I
we
really
cannot live
like
our
that.
lives like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's what I think that's one of the points that I wanted to make to everybody listening is that everything that you're saying can be an inherent way to live in terms of confidence and making a decision and all that. Before we wind up, I want to hit one more thing. You said something in some of your stuff that I was looking at that leadership is about service. Tell me a little bit about what that means to you, because I'm a big believer in the best of us comes out when we recognize that it's in some way in service to others.
So this comes out in a lot of different ways from different people in different environments. I this kind of notion of servant leadership became very in vogue for a time, and I even had a boss at one point that was trying to make the point so much that they were literally showing org charts were upside down, they were inverted, right? It's trying to show that they were there to kind of serve others. The first thing I would say when we talk about leadership as service is I like humility in a leader. So one thing that is absolutely true for me that whenever I have had a leadership position or I'm put into one, that I need to want and feel grateful for the role and for the opportunity, not the opportunity to be paid, but the opportunity to lead others, to help them improve their career, improve their lives, improve the work of the company, but have that gratitude for the position that I find myself in and the position that I can, and then how do I pay that forward, right? How do I do these things? When for I did a 3-year rotation on the board of directors for the governing board for Make-A-Wish here in Central South Texas. And for those of you listening, Make-A-Wish of Central South Texas is an amazing branch of Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish overall is fantastic, but that particular branch, obviously, I'm very close to my heart. They do wonderful work, but obviously when you're there to help a charity, every single thing you're doing is about how what every action you take is for other things. And of course, the stories for Make-A-Wish um, I will become emotional if I tell any of them, but it's truly amazing, and that I would say at that point I was already in a position where I believe very strongly in like humility and gratitude, and we are there to make others achieve. But that really just drove it home, right? Because the while there were things that I personally wanted to get out of being on the governing board of Make-A-Wish, that quickly took a back seat because once you realize what you're doing and for whom you're doing it, it becomes so much more empowering. And when as leaders we start to think about serving others and like what we can give versus what we can get, I think it becomes so much more like internally energizing. That people say things like, when you love your job, you never work a day in your life. I think the way we say this is like when we realize that what we have to bring, what we have to give, what others can maybe benefit from our own leadership. I just think it's super empowering, energizing, and it truly makes it feel less like a job and more like this is part of who you are. It's part of your calling, perhaps even. So I believe strong in that. And if we can always kind of flip the lens and think less about what is it that I'm getting out of this versus what can I do to help others, I think it makes everything better. And to be honest, for sure, your teams will want to do more for you when they feel that from you.
Well, I always ask my guests at the end of our conversation to leave us with something that we can take away. And I think you just did that. So I so appreciate your time. I appreciate this conversation. The ideas that you shared about confidence and how to bring that to your role just in life in general, so wise and so appreciated. So thank you so much, Crispin, for being with me. Tell everybody where they can learn more about you, and please check out Crispin because I mean he's just brilliant. Let's go.
So great. First of all, thank you for having me. Loved the conversation, and yeah, I think it was just really wonderful to talk about some of the things we talked about today. For those of you that are looking to learn more about the Leadership Studio, you can find us online at leadership-studio.com. You can find myself, Crispin Thompson, on LinkedIn, or the company, the Leadership Studio, on LinkedIn. And yeah, happy to help everyone help achieve their potential and be the best leaders they can be.
I think just to make this a little bit on a personal note, I think when you tell people you're going to talk about confidence and all of that, people think that they're going to get some kind of a bombastic lecture about how to be forceful and all. And you really brought a humanity to this, and you
Oh,
made it
thank you.
accessible to people. And I really, really, truly appreciate that perspective, because this is not an easy topic, I think, for people who don't generally feel confident, but you've made it very accessible and approachable. So thank you for that. So if you need a little bit of brilliance in your life, first of all, check out Crispin. And then second of all, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net, where you can sign up for our Brilliance Bit, of which Crispin will be a part when this episode airs. And check us out and all things on brilliantlyresilient.net. And we will see you next time on the next episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Now, before you go, remember this: resilience isn't about bouncing back to who you were. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. If today's episode helped you reset, rise, or see your brilliance a little more clearly, I invite you to take the next step with me. Explore the Brilliantly Resilient resources, including the podcast, books, and the new Brilliantly Resilient mini course series, all designed to meet you exactly where you are. You can learn more and get started at brilliantlyresilient.net. Until next time, stay steady, stay curious, and keep moving forward, one resilient step at a time.